Wanted to mention something about the question, you've asked other folks that I think is really important, is to ask about how being a part of the network has impacted them, but has impacted their life. I think as we are moving forward on the issue of sexualized violence, it's very easy when things are attached to funding and are attached to paid employment to maybe not lose sight of, but get off track a little bit about the purpose. And so I think one of the powerful things about the network is that we're connected with communities and folks in community who are most affected by sexualized violence, and that we've asked them questions, and that our next step is to ask them what they need, because our role, whether we've been impacted by sexualized violence or violence in our lives, our role is in a position of leadership, or be a resource, a group of resources that can support folks. And so it's important to hold ourselves up through that process, but it's also important to acknowledge that we do have the ability to support folks. And part of our responsibility, and the foundation of our responsibility, is to always have our hearts and our ears open, and our minds working to be able to listen, and take up the things that folks have said and turn it into action. I think that's the thing that excites me the most about the network, is that it's not just doing research about sexualized violence. There's a ton out there, and I don't know how many times we need to hear stats about violence against Indigenous women, violence against trans folks, violence against trans folks who are of color or Indigenous. I don't know how many more times we need to hear that, and then it's time to do something about it.
Personally, I was some years back involved in sex work, and for the most part it went okay. However, I had a couple of bad experiences. One experience, in hindsight, was really very traumatic. Prior to my involvement in the network, I had kind of walled that off in my mind. I had minimized it. I had self-stigmatized that I deserved it because I was doing sex work, and that's complete crap, of course. And so, right from the start, my involvement and talking with Kara helped me to reinvestigate that aspect of my life, and has led to considerable healing in that area. So basically, in that regard, I have much more compassion for myself, and that's how it has impacted my work life as well. Is I have more compassion for the clients I work with, because sexualized violence is extremely common, almost universal in sex workers at one time or another. So I guess that really sums up.
Okay, I think for me it's been more of a learning experience than anything. Realizing how many other supports there are out there, and how many other people are working towards bettering life for females and males alike, in this sort of respect. And I think I have a lot of personal experiences that relate to this type of work, and they're just sort of coming out and showing now, as I'm learning and growing through this process.
For me personally, well, just the learning and growth I think that I've had. It's not, sexual violence was something I'd studied academically a little bit, but not a ton. And so I've learned a lot in terms of community level responses and services around sexual and gender-based violence. And I'm learning from everyone in the group about how to be part of a team. So I'm constantly watching for that as well, how are people employing sort of respectful social relations in the group. And it is a really great group for that, actually. And as we're dealing with a hard topic, but very rarely do you ever get much sense of frustration. And if there is frustration, it's you can understand why. Like we're working through some complex issues, but the group is very supportive of each other, and so I'm learning, I think, a lot that way. And yeah, I just think it's so. I think the Sexual Assault Center was like the perfect organization to kind of create the space for everybody to do this.
For me personally, I think that the network has been an incredible learning process. I believe that prior to participating in the network, that I felt I had a good working knowledge of the agencies in our city, how clients could get connected, in what ways they might be served. But when I started participating in this network, I think what became quite apparent is that I I didn't know as much maybe as I need to. And so there's been a lot of learning and in a really positive way. And I feel that that there's been growth for me as a professional. And I think that I'm, my responsibility as a member of that network is to take that information and take that new knowledge wherever possible and extend it and dispense it in whatever way possible to the staff at Transition House and the work that they're doing.
Well, I think for me, one of the big things is just an opportunity to get to know more people and network more and really build some bridges between organizations that I might not have had the opportunity to build if it weren't for the network. And I think part of that too is, just a greater awareness of the resources that are available and greater awareness of the conversations that go on in my personal life and professional life. And just really noticing conversations and little elements of violence in those conversations. Even common phrases that you don't realize are rooted in violence.
Also, on a personal level, I've seen the impacts of violence against women, and I've seen what happens when there is nowhere to go, or there is no knowledge, or there is no awareness of resources. So bridging those gaps, being aware of the gaps, and then working together is going to have a greater and more powerful response than any one organization working alone.
I think there's lots of benefits that have come to me personally from being a part of this network. A couple of the main ones, I think, is making connections that didn't have before. I've been in social services a long time, and specifically in this city for a decade. And I think I know a lot of people in the field, but this has really expanded that feeling of having your go-to people.
So there are some agencies, members of the network, that we have been working with for a long time. For example, the Victoria Women's Transition House and also the Victoria Sexual Assault Center. Those are agencies that we have had a long-standing partnership with. But there are also agencies, members of the network, that we've had very little communication with and haven't worked much in collaboration with. So peers would be one example of that. So I've gotten to know those agencies that were previously mostly unknown to me. And I have gotten to know better the agencies that I thought I already knew, because I've learned about new aspects of their work. I've learned more about their challenges, but also their moments of celebration and the kinds of things that make them tick and that make the people who work there tick. So it's been very rewarding.
For me, the impact has been a very positive one of joining forces with Indigenous and non-Indigenous service providers, supporting the staff in our organization and in the Aboriginal community who work with these issues. And I have a lot of gratitude to be able to pass that on to intelligent, passionate, committed younger women who will take that story forward. And I think too, it's, I know historically when I started in this organization, there was a lot of work that was being done to support two-spirited youth and youth who were trans. And that, just because of staffing changes, I think that shifted over time. It's not that that support wasn't there, but it wasn't as focused. And I see that coming back again. So I think there's been a huge support for the youth team to be able to get more training, more understanding, more knowledge, like you said, kind of opening up issues and speaking to those issues, so that I really, really believe that people read other people's energy. So if youth know that somebody's comfortable with the conversation, they'll have the conversation. It's about creating that emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual safety for people. So I think that the partnership has really contributed to that in a really, really positive way. And we already had a positive working relationship with the Sexual Assault Center. For me as a manager and somebody who has historical, lots of frontline experience, I just think the more that we can build those bridges and strengthen them with other service providers, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, it just helps us serve the needs in our community.
I'm really aware of the strength that's been formed in the relationships through that room, and as a result, the partnerships and the sense of connectedness to other agencies doing similar work, not identical work, but where there's a cross-section in the work we do, and how being a part of that network gives us additional tools and knowledge and awareness to best serve the clients that we are connecting with.
We're now more conscious of making referrals too, so I think that's changed. I think we have learned a lot. Well, I wouldn't say we've learned a lot. We've opened up a space for addressing the issue, and I mean, we always were addressing it. So, but I think people are more conscious now of like what kinds of services are we gonna try to connect to as an organization, and I think we're feeling more like in a place to make those connections than we were before. So, whereas I think maybe before we kind of like just sort of gave into the idea that there wasn't always services for the people that we serve, and that, you know, we felt maybe like we were it. I think we're thinking beyond that now, like what the possibilities could be for better supports.
Mostly that the youth are opening up more about their personal experiences, because I have talked with them, a few of them, about the work that I do and things that I've been doing to, you know, like further educate myself. And yeah, a few youth have actually opened up more and realized that it's safe to talk about, and I think it creates more of a safe space when they know that someone else has like sort of gone through the same thing or is like learning about the same thing.
One of the things that's been great actually is that for Transition House, there's been 2 additional projects that we have partnered on and collaborated with 2 other agencies who also are part of that network, which I think just attests to the importance of knowing one another, knowing how this work can cross the borders that sometimes are created, and work together in a way that is in the best interests of the people that we're serving.
In terms of aspirations, I think one of the things Kara and I have been talking about quite a bit is that we really want to be focused on action and on solutions, and not just talking about what's wrong, but what can we do to address this right now. And with some of the organizational gaps, it can be difficult. It can feel disempowering, and it can feel like we're not actually able to do much about the funding that's available, or other gaps that are in the process, but really focusing on what can we do today to start addressing these issues.
And I think like every time we're, I'm meeting with you guys, or it's, a different workshop, I'm really being exposed to knowledge that I really wouldn't otherwise, if I wasn't being bridged with another organization. Like the trans inclusion workshop, those are things that I had no idea of. And so every single time it kind of opens something in your mind where you're like, hey, I really don't know about that, but I need to. So.
We get kind of focused so much on our work, and at times we get depleted, and it's just nice to have a group to go to that understands that, who are working for the same principles and values. But also, even beyond that, it's just the sharing and holding that space together, I think, has been really important for me, actually. We're stretched, and we're doing what we do in our separate agencies, but the feeling of the larger picture, I think, is the piece that has been very valuable.
I think that part of what I've witnessed with the community-based response network is that the folks that are coming are working towards in their jobs around the issue of sexualized violence, or that issue has become important to them, and that when we gather together, we provide support to each other. It's sort of an underpinning of each meeting that we have, that we hold each other up much in the same way.
I packed my bags again tonight. Oh, I know that just ain't right. And you